Hello, School Transportation Nation. This is Tony Corbin, publisher and president at School Transportation News. We're coming to you live from STN EXPO, Indianapolis. Really excited to be here. And guess what? This podcast brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. You know what? The conference is a buzz, and you know what? Staffing shortages is a big topic we're addressing here at the conference, and we're hearing it from everyone. School bus driver shortage, it's happening, it's real. But guess what? Technology can help with that. There's a solution. TransFinder's intuitive, award-winning Route Finder Plus routing software. It helps you find efficiencies, consolidates routes, eliminates the number of drivers you need without any negative impact. That's because Route Finder Plus uses artificial intelligence optimization combined with your staff's institutional knowledge. Routes can be redrawn to have minimal impact on your community. Let TransFinder support you and search for drivers as well. They just did a webinar talking about how drivers love their jobs. They'd love to share that info with you. Go to their website, learn more, transfinder.com. Also, email them at getplus@transfinder.com. Don't forget to write driver in the subject line or give them a call at 800-373-3609. And guess what, guys? We also have some special guests on the podcast today because if we're in Indianapolis, we got to bring on our legend, our content director, Mr. Ryan Gray.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. It's great to be here. It's been an action-packed last few days, as you were talking about, a lot of discussions regarding the driver shortage. In fact, I just moderated a well-attended session on this topic because, of course, it's at the top of everyone's mind. And speaking a little bit about that, as well as some other things, happy to be joined right now by Nathan Oliver, who's the Director of Transportation at Monroe County Community School Corporation here in the great state of Indiana. Nate, thanks so much for joining us. Why don't you share with us what Monroe County's transportation operation looks like?
So we have 138 routes. We run a two-tier system. We have 25 schools. We'll run 10,250 miles a day transporting kids to and from schools. That doesn't include any field trips or athletic events. That's just to and from school.
Okay. And with the driver shortage, how has that affected you?
We've had to combine 27 routes and reroute to configure to get by. Pre-pandemic, we had 125 drivers. Currently, we're down to 100. So we've had to be creative and reroute 27 routes, combine them, which means we go into our high school, middle schools, we'll unload 15 minutes early, let those students go into a cafeteria, be supervised, and then go back out and run another route with the same driver, same bus.
Okay. And so that has helped. You know, where do you stand in terms of what it was in terms of the driver shortage? Because I understand that last year you had some pretty big issues.
Well, last year we have to take attendance on the routes each day, and the drivers are handwriting those down, and they had to assign seating charts, which they've never done before, so we could do our contact tracing. And a lot of the drivers complained that was more work than they've ever done before for the same pay, and I lost several drivers because of that. So we looked at technology this year and implemented it to where we're doing student tracking. And it assigns the seat, or our routing software. We have built the seating charts in there and routed them that way. And so when a kid gets on the bus, it'll take their attendance and it'll read out to them what seat they're assigned to. So even if I have a sub driver on that route, they know exactly where that student's supposed to go, and they know that they're assigned on the bus. And because of that, now I have drivers that left last year that are thinking about and willing to come back this year because they're not having to do that and have that responsibility on them.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that you are a big consumer of technology now, so obviously that's one aspect of it. What else are you doing in terms of technology? Because you were in a session earlier managing the ROI. So what are you doing, and how are you kind of crunching the numbers to make sure that you are getting that rate of return?
For me, it's not so much a rate of a return as it is a rate of reduced liability and rate of retention for my drivers. Just like the student tracking, that helps retain the drivers. Plus, it also gives us accountability. I know instantly where kids are at if they boarded a bus or didn't board a bus. For the past few years, we tracked anywhere from 8 to 12 students on an average a day that we're missing. and parents would call on, wanted to know where they were at. And now I can pull up within 10 seconds and know they didn't even get on a bus. They're still at the school doing a school activity, which was the case last time. But we'd have to do all call on the drivers, wait for each bus at that school to radio in, say they didn't have the student, try to contact the principal in the building or an administrator. And it would take 30 to 40 minutes to track down to find out that student's still at school. To where now with that, I can pull it up within 10 seconds and know instantly. We also have a 360 PV on all of our buses. So when the driver stops at a school bus stop, they set the brake, open the door, the stop arm goes out, camera comes on the student mirror, and they'll see all four sides of the bus. So they know where the students are at all time as they exit the bus. They'll exit the bus, and then when they're out of that range, they know it's safe to shut the door and proceed on through the route. And then I'm very proud we've added 3 EV buses to our fleet. And we were the first school system in the Midwest to have a bus with an auto reversing door. So if a student was to be caught in the door, it would automatically open up and let them exit without them being caught or dragged down the road, which you have seen in other school districts in different states.
That's really cool technology, Ryan. I mean, I think that's something big. We've talked about dragging, and I mean, we're starting to see the investment in new school buses, and EV is kind of giving a kind of new vision to that technology. I can see that you're excited about that opportunity. How can I get this on more of my buses, right?
So every bus that I've ordered this year, minus the EV buses, they come with lap shoulder seat belts. They have the PV 360 crash mitigation and the auto reversing door. So my buses now are decked out with every option I can get.
Has that changed like the culture of your organization now that you've injected all this technology? Have you seen like behaviorally, like the drivers are telling each other or they're calling their friends like, hey, these buses are like all tricked out now. They're really cool. It's so much better than it was. What's kind of the feedback been?
Drivers love it. And it's kind of started I won't say a fight, but almost like a fight because they want those newer buses. They want the lap shoulder seat belts. They want that technology because it makes it easier for them to do their job during a day. So you have these senior drivers that are like, okay, I've got the most seniority on my route. And it's not so much based on seniority. I pass out the buses based on the route and where I need them in the district, not by the driver or by their seniority, but where I'm replacing it and where I can use it. And the lap shoulder seat belts also help reduce discipline issues. So if I have a school that has a high disciplinary issue, I want to put a bus that has seat belts in there to reduce that and help the driver and retain that driver also because they're dealing with less disciplinary issues.
And what other wish list items do you have? Do you have any when it comes to technology? Is there something that you're eyeing here with the next several procurements?
No, between the student tracking, we've also bought the tablets. So in the past, we had to print off our route descriptions, and it was hard for our subs because they're trying to read a piece of paper, drive down the road, watch for students, watch for other cars, do that in a timely fashion, and it added a lot of stress. Now I have those tablets on the bus and it'll tell them step by step, turns, where to go, how many students they're going to pick up at the next stop. And if they miss a stop, it'll keep telling them to redirect to get back to that stop unless they admit that they'd missed it. Or if we call and say, hey, such and such is not riding today, and then they can hit the button and skip that stop. So that has really made a huge difference for us.
Have you guys considered taking advantage of the ECF funding for Wi-Fi on your school buses? I know the deadline is October 13th to just simply get an invoice from a manufacturer and submit it. And the FCC has got about $2 billion out there for a second window. Is that something you've considered?
We've put Wi-Fi on 9 buses just to try it and see where our peak hours of usage are. And we've monitored those buses, and on routes, we're usually not seeing a lot of Wi-Fi usage. It's our athletic trips and field trips at night where we're seeing it. Kids are going on a sporting event, doing their homework on the way back or on the way down and utilizing that Wi-Fi there. So right now, I don't know that we were really looking at adding Wi-Fi to all of our buses, but just mainly our trip buses to benefit our students while they're on those events.
Mhm. And in terms of shortages, not only is the industry dealing with a shortage of drivers, but there's some supply chain issues, and there's a lot of shortages that we're seeing in terms of automotive manufacturing and whatnot. We're hearing some pretty big horror stories of being able to get buses. Have you had problems receiving new orders? What are you hearing from your dealer?
It worries me because I actually just talked to my dealer, and my new buses that I've ordered are coming in on time, but my next year replacement plan, they told me it could be 2024 before I get the cameras for those buses because of the delay. And right now I have 8 buses that are down waiting on parts for DEF problems and dosing valves that are back ordered, and we've had those already down for 8 weeks. So it's caused a problem having the newer buses. I'm having to put my sub buses on there that don't have all this technology. So the supply chain's really hurting the industry.
That's absolutely a challenge. In talking about, you mentioned DEF, so you still have a considerable amount of diesel buses in your fleet. You're bringing in electric. Are you looking at any other alternative fuels?
No, I researched propane for 2 years and met with the superintendent and the school board, and that was just something that we decided against. We do use gasoline. We have a lot of Class A buses that we use in gasoline, and we use those primarily for our special needs routes and a lot of McKinney Ventos because it makes more sense to send a smaller bus to go get 1 or 2 students on a McKinney Vento and bring them back than sending a large diesel 66 passenger or 84 passenger. So primarily, and with my new superintendent and school board, we're looking at going total electric.
Okay. So with that, now you said you have how many electric buses?
We have 3 right now, and we've put in an order for 5 more.
Okay. And then you were able to utilize some grant money. What are you relying on to bring those buses in?
So on our first round, we purchased the first bus with BDUB mitigation, and then we applied second round also and received grant funding for the 2 buses. It wasn't quite as much as what we received on the first for 1, but still made it very attractive to put 3 in, pilot, try it, and see what we liked. Third round, we did not receive funding, so we looked at other grant options. I can tell you that the manufacturer that I used made it real enticing with some special finance options. So that's why we were able to go ahead and pursue and purchase the other 5.
Interesting. So financing, that's something we've been tracking for several years, where it's not a traditional model that most public entities utilize. What has made financing so attractive in particular for you guys?
Well, when you look at electric, that's a large sum of money per bus. And I'll be honest, when my superintendent first asked me to look into them, I was very hesitant because I'm like, okay, I can buy 4 diesel buses that I can use anywhere for the price of 1 EV bus. And then I did my research and we put 1 in there, and what we gained and what we did for our community was huge. So our first bus, we ran it 46 days. We saved 275 gallons of diesel fuel and avoided the emissions of 6.5 tons of CO2 in our district. And with 3 buses, we'll save 1,008 gallons per bus and avoid the emissions of 75 tons of CO2 in our county. So I sat down and we looked at it and decided how many EV buses we can run on our routes and how many diesel buses we need for our trips. I've already worked with our manufacturer. They're reconfiguring the battery packs to add a 3rd one and get the range where we think we can actually use those for trips. But it'll be interesting to see. But the main driving force was just what we could do for our community. And I don't know if many people know it. They've already had new emissions laws passed on school buses for 2024 and 2027. And there's not a current bus manufactured except an EV bus that meets those 2027 emissions. So there's going to be a big shift and people are going to have to plan ahead.
I'm curious, Ryan. So we were at the Transportation Directors Summit here in Indianapolis. We were at Topgolf with Mr. Ross Bernstein, who was a keynote speaker for us. And he talked a lot about how school districts can take what they're doing and share it at scale. So I heard some big things that you just told me. You care about using fuel and saving it. You care about the emissions for your community. Are you doing anything to actually educate the community on these investments that you're making to get equity and kind of share with them so you can get more buy-in from the school board and other people in the community to kind of reinvest back in the school district to really share all the good you're doing? Because I think the ramifications of what you just described at scale are huge, right?
They are huge. And it's been nice. We have a local radio station where I'll get to do similar interviews with them and talk about what we're doing with our fleet, our transition, and what we've been able to save our community as far as the emissions and the fuel and other things that we're looking at to do in the future. My new superintendent, he and I have sat down and talked several times. We want to put solar over the top of our transportation lot for two reasons. It'll gain shelter for our school buses to help protect them from the elements, but it'll offset our kilowatt hour usage. And it won't plug into our EV buses, but we can run 3 buildings off of that solar and gain that where we're limiting our kilowatt hour usage for the school system, but still keeping our efficiency on our EV buses, even though they're plugged into the grid. And we've also looked at, when I got the 3 EV buses, I talked to our co-op provider for our energy to see what we could do if we had a natural disaster and I needed to power a school. Instead of using a diesel generator, I can take 3 schools to an elementary and plug into those, and I can power the central office and the school so they can still operate. And it's from an EV bus. It's not from a diesel generator.
Yeah, that whole concept of the mobile power plants, certainly. And I also wanted to ask about maintenance. So you'd discussed the benefits in terms of fuel, but I know you haven't had these buses very long, but what are you seeing in terms of maintenance? Because we're hearing it can go anywhere from 60 to 80% reduction in costs just from the maintenance, because, you go from thousands of parts to essentially like 8.
Well, it's still new, so I can't really tell you exactly what those figures will be. Projected cost savings, I look to save between $3,000 and $3,500 a year because I won't have any emissions to maintain, and that's where the high cost is right now. You think of the dosing valves and the buses I have deadlined right now waiting on parts, the catalytic filters that need to be cleaned, and the cost associated with that. You still have your brakes, but with the regenerative braking, that's so much more effective than an exhaust brake. So if we were getting 60,000 miles on a diesel bus with air brakes and an exhaust brake, the amount of regenerative braking with the EV, I highly feel that we'll get 80,000 plus on those brakes and not have to replace them. So it'll be huge.
Now, you talked a little bit about infrastructure, right? Because obviously you don't have electric. Now you have electric. You got to trench your parking lot. You got to put in chargers. Can you talk about the experience with like the local utility? How did that work? Did you work with the dealer? Did you work with who were the stakeholders into making that happen for you?
So as soon as the superintendent asked me to look into the EV bus, I contacted our power provider just to see where they wanted to put it on the lot. I had an idea of where I wanted the infrastructure. They come out and looked at the lot and they said, no, we need to put it here and it'll save you several $100,000 by putting it here versus here. And then we went through. So I suggest anybody that's looking at EV, you need to call your power provider first, bring them out to your location, look at it, and then research the different companies that build the charging stations. Now, I chose Proterra. That's who we use. Our bus is a Thomas Julie with a Proterra chassis, and I also have a Proterra charger system. But the telematics and everything that I gain from using that is beneficial to me, and that's why I chose their system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you lessons learned from this, and you just touched on it. Have there been other big takeaways as you're looking to adopt electric that maybe you were surprised at or you guys weren't fully aware of when you first got into it?
I wish I'd have built the infrastructure bigger at first, and that was my next suggestion to anyone that does this. Research and plan ahead. If you think you're going to do 10 buses, build infrastructure for 20 buses. Because what I put in first, I can't revamp it. It's locked. It's set for 8 buses. That's all I can do. So now I have to come in and put another set of infrastructure for the next set of buses. So planning, looking down the road, long time future of what you think you're going to do with your fleet. Don't rush into it. And I'll warn you, it's not, everybody's asked me, how did your mechanics do? What was the learning curve for your mechanics? The learning curve is not really for the mechanics, it's for the driver. There's so much that driver has to learn to be efficient and get that range and mileage you want on your EV bus. The mechanics, it's still a chassis. It still has grease fittings, still has drive shafts, it still has brakes, air brakes, a compressor. So it just doesn't have a diesel engine, and it doesn't have the diesel exhaust fluid and the emissions. So the maintenance on it is fine. And when you get to the high voltage, my mechanics and technicians won't work on that because it's covered under warranty for 10 years. The manufacturer will come in and do that for us. So it's not their thoughts and concerns, but it was really an easy transition and a big savings that I think will benefit for years to come.
What about, have you done any work or thought about doing any work with your local emergency first responders in terms of them coming out and responding to, God forbid, but in some kind of wreck that they're used to, rolling up to a diesel or even a gasoline bus, but now it's electric?
So we did. We took delivery of our bus in December, but we were not able to put it into the fleet and use it until February because the state police here in Indiana were not familiar with EV buses and they hadn't learned how to inspect them or to really look at them. Thomas come in, they established Monroe County Schools as the training facility for Indiana. And when we brought our mechanics in, we brought other school corporations mechanics, the state police, and our first responders to show them how to shut the high voltage down, how to work the scene if the bus was in an accident. And we'll do that for anybody. If they want to contact me, they're welcome to come to our facility. I'll set it up with the manufacturer and we'll do more training for anybody that wants it.
Okay. And in closing, talking about training and with EV buses, the drivers, right? So a lot of what we heard that affects range is how the drivers operate that bus. You can't just sit down in an EV bus and put the pedal to the metal like you would in a traditional diesel. What have you done with the driver training? Have you, seen any impact from that in terms of, your range so far or just kind of the operations?
So when we got our first EV bus, I assigned one driver to it full time. I wanted her to learn it and then become my trainer for the EV buses. When we first started with the bus, she was using between 30 and 33% battery per route. And we were running about 2.7 kilowatt hours per mile. We ran it for 18 days. I talked to the manufacturer and he said, you need to run it in low instead of drive. You'll get more regenerative braking. You'll still have your high end speed if you need to get on the highway, but it'll save your battery percentage. So we did that. And in one day, she went from 30 and 33% to 24 and 26% battery usage and around 2% kilowatt hours per mile. And then as she got used to the accelerator, when to get on it, when to let off and gain that regenerative braking, she now averages between 1.7 and 1.9 kilowatt hours per mile. And we're only using 17% of battery per day, which also will extend our life of the battery because I don't need to charge it every day. We can actually go 2.5 days and then charge it to gain our life cycles instead of having to charge every day between routes.
And you're able to charge a lot during the day because your routes aren't all that long either, correct?
Her route, the first route we started runs 40, 45 miles a day. And then I have a few routes that I'm going to try the other two on. The highest one is 68 miles because I just want to have that comparison to see how it does. But I have the 60 kilowatt charger on my parking lot and I have a 25 kilowatt charger inside my garage. With the 60 kilowatt, I can charge the bus in an hour and 10 minutes. If I put it in the garage on the 25 kilowatt, it'll take about 3 hours. So we are still able to charge full charge in between routes.
And coming back, full circle to that driver shortage, and technology. Have you got any feedback from the drivers? Are they excited about having EVs in their fleet? Is that helping, you with your recruitment efforts at all?
It is. The driver that we put on the first one, she's been huge for our recruitment. She doesn't want anything else but an EV bus now. And I warned her when she first got the bus, I said, you may not like it because it's so quiet. You'll hear the kids. You don't have that diesel engine to drown out the noise. But because it is so quiet, the noise from the students is quiet. They're not yelling over the road noise or the bus engine or anything. And the discipline has went away. Plus, the handling is so much better on that EV bus than the diesel bus because the weight is centrally located between the axles instead of all of that diesel engine weight on the front axle. So in inclement weather, she didn't slide around. She didn't have any problems getting through the route at all. She actually went through the route better empty in the EV bus than she would the diesel bus and got around fantastic with the loaded bus. And we only use 7% more battery even in 18 below weather just to run the heater. So it's still very efficient in inclement weather.
Well, Nate, you guys got a lot of great things going on there at Monroe County. I really appreciate you spending some time and sharing what's going on there, and looking forward to hearing some great things from you. Thanks so much again for joining us.
Thanks, Ryan. Glad to do it.
All right, special thanks to Nate. Appreciate you coming out today, Indianapolis. We had a great day today at the conference. We're just tying a bow on it. And Ryan Gray, he's working hard, getting us all that good content. Thanks, guys, for the interview. Really interesting stuff, Nate. Learning all about EV, what you guys are doing, driver shortage. There's just so many big issues facing the industry right now, and you guys you're all in this together, right? Everybody's facing very similar challenges to stay in the market. And, we're here to bring that great information. Make sure you go to stnonline.com. We got good stories. We got conference updates going out every day. Guys, check that out. Also, a special thank you to our sponsor, TransFinder. Really appreciate them. Don't forget as well, we have the TSD conference coming up November 17th through the 22nd, and STN EXPO Reno, December 4th through the 9th. STNEXPO.com as well as TSDconference.com. You can subscribe, stream, review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Go to stnpodcast.com. Share that with a friend. We'd love that you guys listen. Excited to hear from you. Email us. Ask us questions. We'd love to hear from you. We'll catch you next week, Nation. We love you.